Okay, so let's take the conversation further from COP28 in Dubai late last year to the ongoing World Economic Forum in Davos. Political and fiscal policy leaders around the world are still searching for answers to the question of adequate funding that will help countries and communities adapt to the impact of climate change. Today, the World Bank President Ajay Banga and the IMF Chief Kristalina Georgieva discussed different ways in which the two multilateral organizations can do more towards sustainable climate changing.
The reality is we cannot afford another set of decades of emissions-heavy growth. That's just the reality. So since we started talking about climate for a minute, at COP28, and this tells you the kinds of things that can be done to change, the World Bank made 5 commitments. The first one is 45% of our financing would go towards climate financing by 2025. Not 2050, by 2025. Because I think a sense of urgency is our only savior in this current circumstance. By the way, we were already running at about 35, so 45 is ambitious, but not crazy. It's entirely possible. More importantly, half of that would go to mitigation, emissions, but half of that would go to adaptation, because the developing world sees climate from a slightly different lens, from the effect rather than the cause. And those of us in the developing world who tend to see climate only from emissions, we are missing the opportunity of engaging the hearts and minds of people all over the world in what matters to them on the ground every day. So that's the first thing. The second thing we announced is that we will connect 100 million people in Africa to renewable power by 2030. So we announced 100. I'm actually working on 200. There are 600 million people in Africa without access to electricity. That, to me, that's a human right. If you do not have electricity, you have nothing. So 200 million people, if the bank can get by 2030, not alone, our money, other public sector money, and most importantly, the private sector's money is required to make this happen. Third, we've talked about methane. Methane from flaring is known. But rice paddy cultivation, waste management, and dairy husbandry can help you enormously with combating methane. Methane is 80 times more dangerous than carbon dioxide. It gets only 2% of climate financing today. We have a misalignment with what we need to focus on. We're talking about working with 15 countries and taking out 10 million tons of methane by focusing on rice paddy, on animal and dairy, and on waste management. Fourth, small countries cannot absorb the impact of a catastrophe. They can lose, even if they're wealthy, they can lose double digits of their GDP in the course of a few hours. We're going to give them the chance not to pay back loans owed to us for 2 years, including the interest, and we'll fund that cost, because we have to be there for them in their bad days, not just in their good days. And the last part is we're going to venture eyes wide open into helping carbon credits, voluntary carbon markets and carbon credits in forestry, projects where we are involved, where we can guarantee the environmental credit, but also the social value, meaning the money goes to the community, not just to the government. These are 5 things, we're not doing them alone.
Our collective commitments, the nationally determined contributions, collectively, they fall around 50% short of where we have to be by 2030, lift up ambition and front-load action. So we need to breathe in the necks of governments. They have to do that. And we as an institution can help them to cost it and plan it together with the World Bank. So it is not a dream, it is doable. Action number 2. I am sick and tired listening to people saying, oh God, it's so expensive. Where are we going to find the money? We are talking about getting to 5 billion by the end of the decade. Last year, the world spent over 5 trillion. My apologies. Last year, the world spent more than $7 trillion in direct and indirect fossil fuel subsidies. 1.3 trillion, I need to get my trillions and billions right, 1.3 trillion direct fossil fuel subsidies. Pull this back and put it to support climate action. And then look into the indirect subsidies that are health costs, but also not pricing carbon. At the fund, I'm now blue in the face saying that we cannot accelerate carbonization fast enough without pricing carbon with predictable increase of carbon price. It has to be $85 by 2030.